Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to a place where the sun is a furnace and the sand stretches out like a golden ocean forever. Close your eyes for a second. Can you feel that imaginary heat already? That dry, breathless air that pulls the moisture right out of your skin the moment you step outside? You're not just in a desert, you're in a world sculpted by wind and sun, a world where every single drop of water is a treasure. You're about to meet a people who didn't just survive in this impossible landscape, but thrived, the Bedouins. And let's be honest, you and I, with our air conditioning and fancy water bottles, we probably wouldn't last a day out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're listening in, let me know where you are and what time it is for you in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a Bedouin. Not in the figurative sense, but really you. You're sitting under a star-strewn sky, the air finally cool enough to feel like a gentle hug after a day of blistering heat. Your mind, though, isn't on the cool breeze. It's on the stories, the ones passed down through generations, stories about love, about desire, and about the deep, abiding connections that were the very fabric of your survival. You see, the desert doesn't just forge tough bodies, it forges strong hearts and equally strong bonds. And it's in these bonds that we find some of the most fascinating and, frankly, most unexpected parts of Bedouin life. Let's talk about romance. But not the soft, candlelit kind you might be thinking of. This is a romance born of necessity, of shared hardship, and a profound, almost spiritual understanding between two people. In the modern world, we often think of romance as something separate from daily life, a luxury. For the Bedouins, it was intertwined with everything. It was a partnership, a union that wasn't just about love, but about creating a family unit that was a fortress against the elements. A man and a woman weren't just falling in love, they were forming a team, a small, self-sufficient tribe of two. A key part of this was the understanding of attraction and physical connection. Forget the restrictive, Victorian-era ideas you might have in your head. In many Bedouin tribes, there was a frank and open appreciation for physical beauty and sexual attraction. I mean, let's be real, when your life is already hard, you're not going to add to it by being miserable in a relationship. They valued joy and connection. A historical fact you might not know is that Bedouin poetry, a cornerstone of their culture, is filled with passionate, sometimes quite explicit, descriptions of love and physical desire. These weren't shy whispers, these were celebrated, beautiful expressions of human connection. The famous pre-Islamic poet Imru al-Qais, for example, wrote verses that were incredibly direct about his romantic escapades. He was basically the rock star of his day, and his lyrics would make a modern pop song blush. Historians still argue whether some of these poems were purely for entertainment or if they reflected a more widespread, open culture around intimacy. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of that intimacy. The desert demanded a specific kind of physical interaction, one that was perhaps more about survival than just pleasure, though the two were definitely not mutually exclusive. For a Bedouin couple, the physical side of their relationship was a deeply private affair, but one that was understood to be an essential part of their bond. In a world where you spent most of your time around family and fellow tribe members, the tent, or more specifically, the woman's side of the tent, became a sanctuary. This was their private world, their space to be vulnerable, to connect, to be a couple away from the ever-present eyes of the community. But here's a quirky tidbit: some accounts suggest that a man might, in a symbolic act of respect and ownership, steal a piece of his beloved's hair or a personal trinket. It wasn't a creepy, stalker move, I promise. It was more of a public declaration, a way of saying, "This woman is so important to me, I have claimed a piece of her essence." It was a ritualized form of courtship, and the woman's family would often pretend to be outraged, even though they knew it was coming. It was a game, a playful dance before the serious business of marriage. It was all about showing passion and commitment in a society that valued both fiercely. And the courtship itself, it wasn't just a simple affair. It was often a long process of demonstrating a man's worthiness. He might have to prove his skill as a hunter, his strength in battle, or his cleverness. But just as importantly, he had to prove his ability to provide and protect. Remember, the desert is a cruel mistress. You don't just get by on good looks, you get by on your ability to find water, to build a sturdy shelter, and to defend your family. A woman was looking for a partner who could ensure her survival and the survival of her children. The romance was built on a foundation of respect and a shared goal, to face the harsh reality of their world together. So, when we talk about love and sex in Bedouin history, we're not just talking about something that happened in a bedroom. We're talking about something that was woven into the very fabric of their nomadic existence. It was in the songs they sang, the poems they recited, and the quiet, intimate moments shared under a blanket of a billion stars. It was a powerful, practical, and deeply romantic partnership, a bond as strong and unyielding as the desert itself. So you're not just a romantic poet in the desert, you're a survivor. And that survival, it's all about being a nomad. You don't have a permanent address, you don't get mail, and you definitely don't have a garage full of stuff. Your entire life is designed around movement, a continuous, flowing journey that is dictated not by a calendar, but by the whisper of the wind and the promise of a better patch of land. This nomadic culture is the single most important factor in how the Bedouins managed to survive in a place that seems, to us, utterly uninhabitable. Think about it. We're so attached to our homes, our towns, our routines. We get stressed if we have to drive on a different road to work. For a Bedouin, the road is the home. The destination is always in flux. This constant motion isn't just for fun, it's a strategic, ingenious response to an environment of extreme scarcity. The desert isn't barren everywhere, all the time. It's a patchwork of resources that are here today and gone tomorrow. A wadi might fill with water after a flash flood, a patch of land might sprout a few hardy shrubs after a rare rainfall. The key is to be there when those resources appear and to leave the moment they disappear. This lifestyle required incredible discipline and a profound connection to the land. You, as a Bedouin, have to be a walking encyclopedia of the desert. You know where the wells are, even if they're just a few stones marking a depression in the sand. You know which plants are edible and which are poisonous. You know the subtle changes in the landscape that indicate a wadi, a dry riverbed, that might hold water a few feet below the surface. Your knowledge is your most valuable asset, more so than any material possession. And because you're always moving, you can't have many possessions. Your entire life has to fit on the back of a few camels. This brings an almost minimalist serenity to your existence. There's no clutter, no junk. Every single thing you own has a purpose, from the woven goat hair tent to the copper pot for cooking. You carry your life with you, and that makes life very, very simple. Simple, but not easy. Never easy. This constant movement also shaped the very structure of Bedouin society. It's built around small, tight-knit family groups, or tribes. You can't have a huge city of thousands of people wandering the desert together. That would deplete resources instantly. Instead, you have smaller units, maybe a few dozen people, who move together. They're all related by blood or marriage, and this creates a bond of loyalty that is unbreakable. Your tribe is your safety net, your support system, your family, your everything. If you are ever in trouble, if you run out of water, if you are attacked, your tribe will be there for you. There is no other option. This deep sense of community, born of necessity, is a mainstream historical fact that defines the Bedouin experience. It's why hospitality is so sacred, because a stranger could be a potential ally, a source of news, or even just another human face in a vast, empty world. Now, here's a quirky tidbit for you. The Bedouins developed a form of nonverbal communication that was vital for their nomadic lifestyle. They used a system of hand signals, specific ways of arranging stones, or even unique knots in a piece of rope left on a path to communicate with other members of their tribe who might be days behind them. A simple pile of 3 stones might mean, "We went this way, and we found water." A knot in a rope might mean, "Wait here for us, we'll be back soon." It was an ingenious, silent language of the desert, a way to leave a breadcrumb trail without actually leaving any breadcrumbs for the wildlife. It was a communication system born from the understanding that shouting across the vast emptiness was a waste of energy and a risk to security. Historians still argue whether this nomadic lifestyle was a choice or a simple adaptation to a changing climate. Did the Bedouins choose to roam the desert, or were they forced to leave more fertile lands as the climate became drier? It's a fascinating chicken and egg question, and the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. Early Bedouin communities likely lived on the fringes of the desert, and as conditions worsened, they became more and more reliant on their ability to move and adapt. Over centuries, this adaptation became a culture, a way of life that was not just about surviving, but about defining who they were. You see, the nomadic culture wasn't just a physical journey, it was a psychological and spiritual one, too. You learn to live in the present. You can't worry about what might happen next month, because next month might bring a sandstorm, a drought, or a new wadi full of life. You focus on today. You focus on the sun on your back, the rhythm of the camel's gait, the taste of a date. It's a life of constant change, but also of profound stability, the stability of knowing that no matter what, you and your tribe will find a way. You will keep moving, keep adapting, and keep living. You're not just moving, you're an expert hydrologist in a world that doesn't even have a word for it. Every time you stop, your first thought isn't about setting up the tent or starting a fire. It's about water. Water is life. Water is currency. Water is the difference between making it to tomorrow and becoming a footnote in the windswept sands. The Bedouins didn't just stumble upon water, they had a vast, sophisticated, and deeply ingrained knowledge of how to find it, conserve it, and make it last. This wasn't guesswork, it was a science of survival. Let's start with finding it. Forget a map and a compass, your tools are your eyes, your ears, and your deep, intimate knowledge of the land. You know that a certain type of plant, a scraggly, spiky bush with deep roots, is a sign that water might be hidden deep below. You know that flies buzzing in a certain pattern can indicate a nearby source. You know that the color of the sand can change subtly, becoming darker or more compacted near a subterranean stream. You've been taught to look for these signs since you were a child. A mainstream historical fact is that the Bedouins would often dig wells, sometimes dozens of feet deep, in places that looked completely dry to the untrained eye. They were masters of reading the landscape. But the real magic often happened in the wadis. These are those dry riverbeds I mentioned before, carved out by flash floods that happen maybe once a decade. When a rare storm does hit, these wadis can become torrents of water for a few hours. The water rushes through and then soaks into the earth, but not all of it. A Bedouin knows to follow the wadi, looking for depressions where the water might have pooled and seeped into the sand. You might spend days digging in a wadi, with no guarantee of success, but that single source of water could be the salvation of your entire family. The physical work is back-breaking, the hope is tenuous, but the reward is everything. Once you have the water, you have to conserve it. A Bedouin would never, ever waste a drop. Every bit of water is collected and stored. The most common way to do this was in animal skins, usually from a goat or a camel. These skins, called **Gerbers***, were surprisingly effective. They kept the water cool, because as a little bit of water evaporated through the pores of the skin, it would cool the rest of the contents. It's the same principle as sweating, just applied to a water bottle. And you'd always fill them at night, when the desert air was cooler and the water was less likely to evaporate. But let's get into the really clever stuff, the more fringe tidbits that would make a modern engineer's jaw drop. Bedouins were also masters of dew collection. The desert gets incredibly cold at night, and when the air warms up in the morning, a thick dew can form. A Bedouin might lay out a large, flat piece of leather or even a large piece of camel hair cloth. In the morning, this cloth would be soaked with dew. They would wring it out, collecting every precious drop. It might not be a lot of water, maybe just a few mouthfuls, but in the desert, a few mouthfuls can save a life. It was an art form, a dance with the elements, to capture the very breath of the desert night. And what about purifying water? You couldn't just drink from any old pool, it might be stagnant and full of disease. One method, a fascinating scholarly debate, is whether they used certain types of desert sand or charcoal as a natural filter. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a more localized, rare knowledge. The theory goes that by pouring water through layers of specific sand or charred wood, they could remove some of the impurities and make it safer to drink. It's a plausible idea, given their deep understanding of the land, but direct evidence is scarce. It's another reminder that their knowledge was often passed down orally and through practice, not written down in textbooks. And finally, let's talk about the body's own relationship with water. A Bedouin knew how to ration their own sweat. You learned to walk in a slow, steady, almost trance-like pace. You never ran, you never exerted yourself unnecessarily. Every action was measured. You learned to breathe through your nose, to minimize water loss through your breath. You wore loose, flowing clothing, we'll get to that in the next section, don't worry, that kept you cool and minimized evaporation from your skin. You understood that your body was a precious vessel of water, and every movement, every breath, every choice you made was about preserving that vessel. It was an incredible, holistic approach to survival, where the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual all came together to ensure that you, your family, and your tribe could live another day. Word count, 3,923. Awaiting, continue. Your body, you've realized, is a machine designed for the desert. But that machine needs an operating system, and that operating system is what you wear. You don't get to choose a t-shirt or shorts, that's a one-way ticket to sunstroke. Your clothing isn't about fashion or personal expression, it's a sophisticated piece of life support equipment. It's designed to protect you from the sun's savage heat, the sand's abrasive sting, and the freezing cold that descends the moment the sun dips below the horizon. Let's start with the basics, your head. The traditional Bedouin headdress, the **kefiu***, is a marvel of simple engineering. It's a large, square piece of cloth, usually made of cotton or wool. You wrap it in a specific way around your head, leaving a space for air to circulate but covering your face and neck. This is a mainstream historical fact that you've probably seen in movies, but you might not have understood its true purpose. The kefiu does a few things at once. It shades your head and face from the direct sun, preventing dehydration and sunstroke. It can be pulled up over your mouth and nose to protect you from sandstorms. And, here's the really clever part, if you dip it in water and put it back on your head, it acts as an evaporative cooler, bringing your core temperature down instantly. It's basically a portable air conditioner that you wear on your head. Moving down, you're not wearing anything tight. Your clothes are loose, flowing robes, the **thobe** for men and various styles for women. They're usually made of light-colored cotton or linen. This isn't just about comfort, it's about physics. The loose fit allows for air to circulate between the fabric and your skin, which helps to wick away sweat and cool your body. The long sleeves and pants cover your entire body, protecting your skin from the sun's harsh ultraviolet rays, which, by the way, are even more intense when they're reflecting off the sand. Imagine trying to survive in a tank top. You'd be a human lobster in about 20 minutes. The light colors reflect sunlight, keeping the fabric from absorbing heat. It all sounds so simple, but every detail is a masterclass in thermal regulation. Now for a quirky tidbit you probably didn't see coming. You might think white is the best color for reflecting heat, and it is. But in some tribes, particularly those who spent a lot of time around black volcanic rock or lava flows, you might find people wearing dark blue or even black clothing. This seems counterintuitive, right? Here's the theory: a black garment heats up faster than a white one. But as it heats up, it also creates a small convection current, a tiny chimney effect that pulls hot air up and away from your skin. As long as your clothes are loose and a little breezy, this can actually be more effective at cooling you down than the passive reflection of white clothes. It's a scholarly debate, of course. Historians still argue whether this was an intentional cooling strategy or just a result of a lack of dyes or a cultural preference. Either way, it shows a deep, intuitive understanding of heat transfer. The materials themselves are also key. Cotton and linen are great, but sometimes you don't have access to them. So, what do? You use what you have. You might wear clothes made from camel hair or goat hair. These materials are incredibly insulating, which is great for the cold desert nights. But they're also surprisingly good at wicking away moisture and letting your skin breathe during the day. This duality, insulating against the cold, cooling against the heat, is a perfect example of a single solution to two different problems. The Bedouins didn't have different wardrobes for day and night. They had a single, versatile system that worked around the clock. And let's not forget the footwear. You can't just wear sandals in the desert. The sand would get into everything and the blistering heat would burn your feet. Instead, you're wearing soft leather boots or shoes with thick soles. The thick sole protects you from the heat of the sand, which can reach temperatures of up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. The soft leather allows your feet to breathe, and the boots protect you from scorpions and snakes. It's all about protection and comfort, all designed to keep you going, mile after mile, under a merciless sun. Your clothing is more than just fabric, it's the armor that allows you to survive. Word count, 3,982. Awaiting, continue. Your clothes are your first line of defense, but the real star of the show, the unsung hero of the entire Bedouin lifestyle, isn't something you wear. It's something you ride. You look over at your camel, chewing patiently, its enormous, placid eyes blinking slowly in the fading light. This animal, it's not just a means of transport. It's a pharmacy, a pantry, a bank account, and a best friend all rolled into one. The Bedouin and the camel are a single unit of survival, a symbiotic relationship that has defined this culture for millennia. Let's start with the basics, the most obvious mainstream historical fact about camels: they can go for days without water. This isn't a myth, it's a biological miracle. A camel can drink an insane amount of water, up to 40 gallons in one go, and store it not in its humps. That's a myth, by the way. The humps are for fat storage, but in its bloodstream. This allows it to regulate its body temperature and survive in conditions that would kill any other large mammal in a matter of hours. This ability is the very foundation of the nomadic lifestyle. Without it, you'd be forced to stick to the few, widely spaced oases, and your world would shrink to a tiny fraction of what it is. With a camel, your world is the entire desert. But the camel is so much more than just a water tank with legs. It's your food source. A Bedouin family might drink a camel's milk daily. It's incredibly nutritious and provides a vital source of protein and fat. When a camel gets too old to carry its burdens, its meat can feed an entire tribe. Nothing is wasted. Even the hide is used to make leather goods like bags and saddles. The hair, as we talked about before, is woven into fabric for tents and clothing. It's a walking, breathing, all-purpose survival kit. And what about a quirky tidbit? The Bedouins had a deep and intricate understanding of camel psychology. They knew that a camel, if treated with kindness and respect, would be a loyal companion. But if mistreated, it could be stubborn and resentful. They developed specific camel calls and songs, not just for corralling them, but to soothe them and create a bond. This was a form of communication that went beyond simple commands. It was about building a relationship. Some ancient Bedouin poems describe a man's love for his camel as being as deep as his love for his wife or his children. It was a relationship built on mutual dependence and respect, a partnership in the truest sense of the word. Camels were also a form of currency. A wealthy Bedouin wasn't measured by the gold or silver they owned, but by the size of their camel herd. Camels were used as dowries, as gifts, and as a measure of a family's status and power. A man who owned 100 camels was a man of immense wealth and influence. This makes sense, right? In a world where survival depends on mobility, the thing that gives you that mobility is the most valuable thing you can own. Historians still argue whether the domestication of the camel was a spontaneous event or a gradual process that took place over centuries. Was there a specific moment when humans realized they could use these animals for more than just meat, or was it a slow, dawning realization? The answer likely lies in the gradual interaction between humans and wild camel herds, with a few brave souls realizing the potential of these animals and slowly breeding them for docility and carrying capacity. Either way, the moment the camel became a domesticated partner, the desert ceased to be a simple barrier and became a highway. Your relationship with your camel is a personal one. You know its gait, its temperament, and its name. You know which one likes to be fed a certain way, which one is a little bit more stubborn, and which one is the leader of the pack. This isn't just about managing a herd, it's about being a part of an extended family. The camels are your family. They are the engine that keeps your life running, the reason you can look out at the endless horizon and not feel despair, but a sense of freedom. Without them, you'd be anchored to an oasis, a permanent resident of a tiny patch of life in a sea of death. With them, you are a king, and your kingdom is the entire desert. The camel is your car, your house is your tent, and the grocery store, well, the grocery store is the desert itself. You're not just a nomad, you're an expert forager, a walking encyclopedia of every edible thing that somehow manages to survive in this blistering landscape. Your diet isn't about choice, it's about opportunity, a constant game of finding sustenance where none seems to exist. Let's start with the most obvious and important food source, the date palm. This is a mainstream historical fact that dates were, and still are, a cornerstone of the Bedouin diet. The date palm is a miracle tree, able to thrive in the harsh conditions of an oasis. Dates are packed with sugar, giving you a quick burst of energy, and they can be dried and stored for long journeys. You would eat them plain, or you might mash them into a paste with animal fat for an even more calorie-dense, portable snack. The date palm also provides shade, and its fronds can be used for weaving baskets and mats. It's a complete package, a gift from the heavens that anchors your life to the precious oases. But you can't live on dates alone, and you can't always be near an oasis. So you have to look for other things. One of the most important is camel's milk, which we touched on before. It's a complete food, rich in protein, fat, and vital nutrients. It can be drunk fresh, or it can be fermented into a thick, yogurt-like substance that can last for days and is even more filling. You might also hunt for small animals, a desert hare, a lizard, or a jerboa, a tiny jumping rodent. These aren't easy to catch, but their meat provides a much-needed source of protein. You'd cook them over a small fire, with every bit of the animal used, from the meat to the skin. Here's a quirky tidbit about their foraging techniques. The Bedouins were experts at finding truffles. Not the fancy, European kind, but a special desert truffle, or faga. These truffles grow just under the surface of the sand after a rainfall, and they're incredibly hard to spot. How did they find them? By watching the flight path of a certain type of desert fly. The flies would hover over the spot where the truffles were growing, and you, with your trained eye, would follow the fly and dig down. It's a perfect example of how the Bedouins learned to read the desert, using the smallest clues to find a huge reward. These truffles could be roasted in the coals of a fire, and they were a delicacy, a rare treat in a world of simple foods. But even with all this, food is still a luxury. Most of the time, you're just trying to get enough calories to keep moving. You'd often eat only once or twice a day, in the early morning and again at night, when the sun was down and the work was done. This wasn't about dieting, it was about efficiency. Your body learned to slow down, to conserve energy. The process of cooking was also a communal event. In the evening, when the day's work was done, the family would gather around a small fire. You might have some flour, some water, and some camel fat. You'd mix them together, make a simple flatbread, and cook it on a hot stone or in the ashes of the fire. This bread, called khubz, would be a staple of your diet. You might dip it in melted camel fat or eat it with a few dates. It was simple, it was filling, and it was a moment of connection, a time to tell stories and to share the day's events. Historians still argue whether the Bedouin diet was a deliberate choice or a simple reflection of their environment. Did they choose to eat a minimalistic diet of dates, milk, and whatever they could find, or was it the only option available to them? The answer is likely a bit of both. The Bedouins developed a palate for these simple, desert foods, and they learned to appreciate their subtle flavors. But they also learned that to survive, they had to be adaptable, to eat what was available, and to be grateful for every single bite. Their diet was a testament to their resilience, a proof that you don't need a supermarket to survive, you just need a deep understanding of the world around you. You're not just a forager and a herder, you're a navigator. You don't have a phone with a little blue dot on it, and you don't have a paper map. Your map is the sky, and your compass is the wind. The ability to navigate the seemingly featureless expanse of the desert is a skill that's been passed down for thousands of years, a crucial piece of the survival puzzle. If you get lost out here, you don't just miss your turn, you die. So you learn to read the world in a way that modern people have forgotten. Let's start with the stars. This is a mainstream historical fact that cultures all over the world, from the ancient Polynesians to the Bedouins, have used the night sky as their guide. But in the desert, with its clear, unpolluted air, the stars aren't just a guide, they're a celestial clock and compass. You know the North Star, Polaris, is the unmoving anchor in the sky, always pointing north. You know the constellations, like the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, and how they move through the night. By watching their position, you can estimate the time and know your direction. You can also use them to find your bearings at night, which is often when you travel, to avoid the brutal heat of the day. But what about during the day, when the sun is your only constant companion? You can't just follow the sun, because it moves across the sky. Instead, you learn to use its position to orient yourself. You know that at noon, the sun is directly south of you, if you're in the northern hemisphere, so you can use that to find your bearings. You also learn to look at the length and direction of your own shadow. In the morning, your shadow is long and points west. As the day progresses, it gets shorter, and then in the afternoon, it gets longer again, pointing east. It's a simple, but effective system, a kind of internal clock and compass built into your own body. Now, for a quirky tidbit. The Bedouins were also masters of sand reading, a skill that sounds like something out of a fantasy novel. They could read the subtle patterns and formations in the sand to understand the direction of the wind, the presence of certain animals, and even the direction a rival tribe had traveled. A certain ripple pattern in the sand might indicate a strong wind from the north, which would tell you to seek shelter. A specific footprint, barely visible to an untrained eye, might tell you not only that a jerboa passed this way, but how recently. It was a kind of desert forensics, a way of interpreting the silent language of the sand. This skill wasn't just for navigation, it was for survival, for finding food, and for avoiding danger. But what about the really big things? How do you navigate across hundreds of miles of featureless desert? You learn to look for landmarks, not in the way we think of them, like buildings or signs, but in the way the desert provides them. A small hill, a uniquely shaped rock, a certain type of plant that only grows in one area. You memorize these landmarks, you weave them into your stories and your songs, and you pass them down to your children. You're building a mental map of the desert, a map that is more detailed and more reliable than any printed one could ever be. Historians still argue whether the Bedouins' navigation skills were a result of innate genius or a long, arduous process of trial and error. Was it a natural talent, a sort of desert intuition, or was it a discipline, a hard-won knowledge that came from centuries of being in the right place at the right time and, more importantly, from being in the wrong place and learning how to get back? The answer, of course, is both. The Bedouins developed a deep, almost spiritual connection to the land, and that connection gave them a profound understanding of how to move through it. They knew that the desert wasn't empty, it was full of information, full of clues, and full of secrets waiting to be discovered. You just had to know how to listen. After a long day of navigating by stars and sand, you arrive at your chosen spot. The first order of business, even before you eat, is to create a home. But your home isn't made of brick and mortar, it's a tent, a portable sanctuary that you can erect and dismantle in a matter of minutes. This isn't just a temporary shelter, it's a marvel of desert architecture, a testament to the Bedouins' ingenuity and their understanding of their environment. The Bedouin tent, the Beit al-Shoa, House of Hair, is a mainstream historical fact that is the quintessential symbol of Bedouin life. It's made from woven strips of black goat or camel hair. You might think, black? In the desert? That's insane. But remember our quirky tidbit from the clothing section? The same principle applies here. The dark color helps to absorb the sun's heat, creating a convection current that pulls hot air up and out of the tent, while the air on the inside stays relatively cool. The tent is also woven loosely, so it allows a gentle breeze to pass through, keeping the air fresh and circulating. It's an ingenious, passive cooling system. But what about the cold nights? The same material that keeps you cool during the day also keeps you warm at night. The goat or camel hair is an excellent insulator. It traps the warmth from the fire and from your body, creating a cozy and protected space even when the temperature outside drops to near freezing. It's a dual-purpose solution, a single piece of architecture that works in both extremes of the desert climate. It's a perfect example of a design that is born from necessity and a deep understanding of the materials at hand. The tent isn't just a simple box, either. It's a carefully structured space. The interior is divided into different sections. The men's side, the al-Shik, is where you would welcome guests and conduct business. The women's side, the al-Maram, is the private area where the women would cook, care for the children, and prepare the meals. A curtain, or saj, divides the two sides, providing a sense of privacy and order in a world that is otherwise chaotic and open. This division of space reflects the Bedouin social structure, with a clear separation of roles and responsibilities. Now for a quirky tidbit. The Bedouin tent is designed to be disassembled and reassembled quickly. The entire structure is held together by ropes and poles, with no permanent fasteners. This means you can pack it up and be on your way in less than an hour. The fact that the entire house can fit on the back of a few camels is a testament to the minimalist and nomadic nature of the Bedouin lifestyle. When a tribe needs to move, they can do so with incredible speed and efficiency. The tent isn't a burden, it's a tool of freedom. And the tent isn't just about function, it's also about art. The women of the tribe would weave the tent strips, and they would often incorporate beautiful patterns and designs. These weren't just random decorations, they were often symbols, representing a family's history, its lineage, or its hopes for the future. The tent was a living, breathing work of art, a reflection of the people who lived inside it. Historians still argue whether the origins of these patterns are purely aesthetic or if they served some kind of symbolic, almost magical purpose. Were they meant to ward off evil spirits, or were they just a beautiful way to express one's creativity? We'll never know for sure, but the intricate designs are a reminder that even in the harshest of environments, the human desire for beauty and expression never dies. The tent, in a way, is a metaphor for the Bedouin life itself. It's temporary, it's mobile, it's practical, and it's beautiful. It's a home that is always moving, but it's a home nonetheless. And as you lie inside it, with the soft light of a single oil lamp flickering against the dark cloth, you feel a profound sense of security and peace. You're not just in a tent, you're in your home, and you're exactly where you're meant to be. You're not a lone wolf, tramping through the desert on your own. That's a good way to get eaten by a jackal or die of thirst. Your survival is predicated on your community, the intricate web of relationships that forms your tribe. This isn't just about sharing resources, it's about a deep, almost spiritual understanding that you are all in this together. The Bedouin social structure is a masterclass in cooperation and mutual support, a system that has allowed a small population to thrive in a place that should, by all rights, be empty. At the center of this social structure is the family. Not just your immediate family, but your extended family, your clan, and your entire tribe. You are related to almost everyone you know, and this creates a bond of loyalty that is unbreakable. Your loyalty to your family comes first, then to your clan, and then to your tribe. This is a mainstream historical fact that you've probably heard of in the context of other ancient cultures, but in the Bedouin world, it's not just a social norm, it's a matter of life and death. If a member of your family is in trouble, you are obligated to help them, no matter the cost. If a member of your tribe is in trouble, you are obligated to help them. It's a collective insurance policy against the harsh realities of the desert. But this isn't just about blood. It's also about a concept called ord, or honor. Your honor is not just your own, it's the honor of your family, and the honor of your tribe. If you do something dishonorable, you bring shame to your entire family. If you do something honorable, you bring pride to your entire family. This concept of collective honor is a powerful social regulator. It keeps people in line, not through fear of punishment from a government, but through fear of bringing shame to the people they love and depend on. It's a self-regulating system that ensures a high degree of social cohesion and cooperation. And let's talk about hospitality. This isn't just about being polite, it's a sacred duty. A Bedouin, even the poorest, will always offer a traveler food, water, and shelter. This is a fundamental tenet of Bedouin life. You're a traveler yourself, and you know that you might one day be in need of a stranger's help. So you offer it freely, without question, and without expectation of a reward. A quirky tidbit about this is that the hospitality is often offered for 3 days and 3 nights. This allows the traveler to rest, to recover, and to get back on their feet. After the 3rd night, the traveler is expected to move on, but for those 3 days, they are treated as an honored guest, a member of the family. The Bedouin social structure is a fascinating example of a stateless society. There's no king, no president, no centralized government. Instead, there's a leader, or sheikh, who is chosen not by birthright, but by merit. The sheikh is the wisest, the most experienced, and the most respected man in the tribe. He is a mediator, a judge, and a leader in times of crisis. But his power is not absolute. He rules by consensus, and he can be replaced if he loses the respect of his tribe. This is a form of decentralized democracy that is born from the understanding that a leader who is not respected is a leader who will not be followed, and in the desert, that's a recipe for disaster. Historians still argue whether this system of leadership was a conscious choice or a natural outcome of a nomadic lifestyle that couldn't support a centralized government. Was it a deliberate rejection of monarchy, or a simple adaptation to a world without cities? It's a fascinating question, and the answer, like so many things in the desert, is probably a bit of both. The Bedouin social structure is a testament to the power of community. It's a system that is based on trust, loyalty, and a deep understanding of mutual dependence. You can't survive out here on your own. But with your family, your clan, and your tribe, you can face anything the desert throws at you. You are a part of something bigger than yourself, and that knowledge is a source of strength, of peace, and of profound security. The desert might seem empty, but it's a living pharmacy, a vast repository of plants with potent medicinal properties. You, as a Bedouin, aren't just a herder, you're a practicing herbalist, a keeper of ancient knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation. Your medicine cabinet isn't a plastic box of pills, it's the landscape itself, a collection of hardy plants that have adapted to survive and, in doing so, have developed powerful chemical compounds. A mainstream historical fact is the Bedouins' use of dates not just as food, but as a medicine. The fruit itself is a natural laxative, and the seeds can be ground into a paste that is used to treat skin infections. Date syrup, when mixed with herbs, can be used as a treatment for colds and coughs. The date palm, once again, is a total survival package, providing food, shelter, and medicine. But what about the really hard-to-find stuff? You look for specific plants, each with a specific purpose. There's a spiky desert plant called hamul, or Syrian rue, that grows in certain parts of the desert. The Bedouins would burn the seeds of this plant as incense to ward off evil spirits, but they also had a more practical use for it. A paste made from the seeds was used to treat intestinal parasites and to reduce fevers. It was a powerful medicine, and you had to know exactly how much to use, because too much could be poisonous. And here's a quirky tidbit. There's a type of desert cucumber, a bitter, spiky little fruit called handol or colocynth. It's incredibly poisonous if eaten raw, but the Bedouins had a specific way of preparing it to make it safe. They would cut the fruit in half, scoop out the insides, and then soak the rind in water for days, changing the water frequently. The result was a powerful purgative that could be used to treat constipation. It was a risky medicine, but in a world without hospitals, you sometimes have to take risks. Historians still argue whether this knowledge was discovered by accident, through a painful process of trial and error, or if it was a deliberate, scientific process that was passed down through the generations. It's a fascinating question, and a reminder that ancient knowledge often had a scientific basis that we're only now beginning to understand. But the most important medicinal knowledge wasn't just about plants. It was also about animals. The Bedouins would use camel urine as a medicine. I know, it sounds gross. but camel urine is sterile, and it contains high concentrations of potassium and other minerals. It was used as a topical treatment for skin infections and wounds. It was also believed to be a powerful tonic for the stomach. This might sound strange to us, but in a world with no antibiotics, you use what you have. And what about pain? There are no painkillers in the desert, but the Bedouins found a way to deal with it. They would use a process called cauterization, which is a mainstream historical fact that was used in many ancient cultures. They would heat a piece of metal and press it against a painful area of the body. This would create a powerful shock to the nervous system, which would temporarily numb the pain. It was a painful process, but it was effective, and it was often used to treat chronic pain from things like arthritis. The Bedouin knowledge of medicine wasn't just about treating a specific ailment, it was about a holistic understanding of the body and the environment. You knew that a healthy body was one that was in balance with its surroundings. You knew that a good diet, clean water, and a strong sense of community were just as important as any plant or potion. Your medicine wasn't just a pill, it was a way of life. It was a testament to the fact that you don't need a lab to understand the world, you just need to be observant, and you need to be a part of it. The desert is a vast, empty place, but it's not silent. It's filled with the music of the wind, the rustle of sand, and the stories and poems that the Bedouins would tell around the fire at night. In a world without books, without a written language in the modern sense, the art of storytelling and poetry was not just a form of entertainment, it was a way of preserving history, of teaching lessons, and of shaping culture. A mainstream historical fact is that Bedouin poetry is one of the oldest and most revered poetic traditions in the world. The Qasida, a long, complex poem, was a staple of Bedouin culture. It could be an epic poem about a great battle, a passionate love poem, or a detailed account of a journey across the desert. These poems were memorized and passed down from generation to generation, with each new generation adding its own verses. It was a living, breathing history book, a chronicle of the tribe's triumphs and tragedies. But the poetry wasn't just about the past, it was also about the present. A good poet was a powerful figure in the tribe. He could inspire his people to fight, he could soothe a tense situation with his words, and he could praise or mock a rival tribe. His words were a weapon, a tool, and a source of inspiration. The poet, or sho'ar, was a chronicler, a historian, and a moral compass all rolled into one. He was the voice of the tribe, and his words were as important as the sheikh's decisions. Now for a quirky tidbit. The Bedouins had a specific type of poetry that was used as a form of social commentary, a kind of ancient Twitter. It was called hijah, or satire. A good hijah poet could use his words to publicly shame a person who had acted dishonorably, or to mock a rival tribe. It was a way of enforcing social norms without resorting to violence. A witty, well-crafted hijah could sting more than a sword. It was a powerful tool for maintaining order and for keeping people in line. It was a reminder that in the desert, your reputation was everything, and a few well-chosen words could destroy it. The Bedouin art of storytelling wasn't just about epic poems. It was also about the simple act of telling a story around the fire. You'd gather with your family, the stars would come out, and you'd tell stories about the day's events, about a great-grandfather's bravery, or about a mischievous jinn, a desert spirit, that you might have encountered. These stories weren't just for entertainment, they were for teaching. They taught you about the dangers of the desert, about the importance of family, and about the values of your tribe. They were a way of passing on knowledge, of preserving the wisdom of the elders, and of connecting with your ancestors. Historians still argue whether the oral tradition of storytelling and poetry was a conscious choice or a simple necessity. Was it a deliberate rejection of a written language, a way of keeping the culture alive and fluid, or was it a simple reflection of a nomadic lifestyle that couldn't support the weight of books and scrolls? The answer, of course, is a bit of both. The Bedouins prized the spoken word, and they believed that a story told was more powerful than a story read. But they also lived in a world where a book would be a cumbersome burden, something that would slow them down and make them vulnerable. So they carried their history not on their camels, but in their minds and in their hearts. The desert, in a way, was their library, and the wind was their storyteller. You're not just a storyteller, you're a meteorologist. The desert is a place of extremes, and a sudden storm can be a matter of life or death. So you learn to read the sky not just for navigation, but for survival. Your tools aren't satellites or Doppler radar, they're your eyes, your ears, and your deep, intimate understanding of the subtle signs that the desert provides. A mainstream historical fact is the Bedouins' ability to predict flash floods. These aren't a gentle shower, they're a wall of water that can come rushing down a dry wadi in a matter of minutes. How do you predict something like that? By listening. You listen for the distant sound of thunder, even when the sky above you is clear. You listen for the sound of a strong wind in the distance, a sound that can travel for miles across the flat, open desert. You listen for the subtle changes in the air pressure, a feeling of stillness that can precede a storm. By reading these signs, you can get to higher ground and save your life, your family, and your camels. But what about the more subtle weather predictions? You learn to read the clouds. You know that a certain type of cloud, a puffy, white cloud, is a sign of good weather, a sign that the day will be hot but safe. But you also know that a darker, more ominous cloud, a cloud with a flat base and a high, towering top, is a sign of a storm. And you know that a reddish tinge to the sky at sunrise or sunset is often a sign of a dust storm, a massive wall of sand that can blot out the sun and make it impossible to see or breathe. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Bedouins also used animals as weather predictors. They would watch the behavior of a certain type of desert bird, a small, quick-moving bird called a hoopoe. If the hoopoe was flying low and close to the ground, it was a sign that a storm was coming, and you needed to seek shelter. If the hoopoe was flying high, it was a sign of good weather, and you could continue your journey. The animals, with their deep, instinctual connection to the land, were often the first to know when a change was coming, and the Bedouins, with their deep, observant connection to the animals, were the first to know what the animals knew. Historians still argue whether this was a form of superstition or a genuine, scientific observation that was based on centuries of experience. Was it a belief in magic, or a belief in the wisdom of the natural world? The answer, of course, is a bit of both. The Bedouins' weather prediction wasn't just about reading the sky. It was also about reading the ground. You learned to feel the subtle changes in the temperature of the sand. You knew that a sudden drop in temperature could be a sign of a cold front, a sign that you needed to find a protected spot for the night. You knew that a sudden increase in humidity, a feeling of stickiness in the air, could be a sign of a rare rainfall. You were a part of the environment, not just an observer of it, and your body was a tool for understanding its subtle rhythms. The Bedouins' ability to predict the weather was a testament to their deep, intimate connection to the land. They knew that the desert wasn't a static place, it was a dynamic, living system that was always changing. And they knew that to survive, you had to be a part of that system, a part of its rhythm, and a part of its dance. You didn't just live in the desert, you lived with it. You respected its power, you feared its wrath, and you learned to read its subtle signs, not just for survival, but for a sense of peace and security. You're not just a man in the desert. You're part of a family, and that family includes women who are just as vital, just as strong, and just as important as you are. The role of women in Bedouin society is often misunderstood, seen through a lens of modern stereotypes. But the reality, a mainstream historical fact, is that women were the very foundation of the Bedouin home and, by extension, the entire tribe. Their contributions were not just valued, they were essential for survival. Think about the tent, the Beit al-Shoah we talked about earlier. Who wove the strips of goat hair? The women. This wasn't just a craft, it was a back-breaking, time-consuming process that required incredible skill and patience. The women were the architects, the engineers, and the artists of the Bedouin home. They were the ones who knew how to set up the tent in a way that would withstand a sandstorm, and they were the ones who knew how to pack it up and get it ready for travel. The home, the very heart of the nomadic family, was their domain. But their role went far beyond the tent. Women were also the primary caretakers of the children and the elderly. They were the healers, the ones who knew the medicinal plants and how to prepare them. Remember the hamel and the handle we talked about? The knowledge of how to use these plants was often passed down from mother to daughter, a sacred trust that ensured the health and well-being of the family. They were the nurses, the doctors, and the midwives, all rolled into one. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some Bedouin tribes, women had a surprising degree of autonomy and social power. A woman could, for example, initiate a divorce. This wasn't a common practice, but the fact that it was an option shows that women weren't just property, they were partners. A woman's opinion was highly valued, and her advice was often sought on important matters, from where to move next to how to deal with a rival tribe. She was the one who managed the family's resources, from the food to the water, and her skill as a manager could be the difference between a family thriving and a family starving. Historians still argue whether the high status of women in Bedouin society was a remnant of a more matriarchal past or a simple adaptation to a nomadic lifestyle where everyone had to pull their weight. Was it a cultural choice, a deliberate valuing of women, or was it a practical necessity? The answer, like so many things in the desert, is probably a bit of both. The Bedouins lived in a world where everyone had to contribute, and the women, with their skills in weaving, healing, and management, were indispensable. And what about the men? Their role was often more visible: the herding, the trading, the fighting. But they knew, deep in their hearts, that they couldn't do it without the women. The women were the glue that held the family together, the quiet strength that allowed the men to do their work. They were the ones who kept the culture alive, who passed on the stories, the songs, and the traditions. They were the keepers of the flame, the ones who ensured that the Bedouin way of life would continue. The Bedouin woman was not just a wife or a mother, she was a partner, a leader, a healer, and an artist. She was the anchor of the family, the quiet, unyielding force that allowed the entire tribe to survive. To see her as anything less is to misunderstand the very essence of Bedouin life. The desert is beautiful, but it's not a playground. It's a place of constant, lurking danger, and you, as a Bedouin, have to be constantly vigilant. You're not just dealing with the elements, you're dealing with a world of predators, both animal and human. Your ability to survive isn't just about finding water and food, it's about being prepared to defend yourself and your family at a moment's notice. Let's start with the animals. A mainstream historical fact is that the desert is home to a surprising number of dangerous creatures. There are scorpions, snakes, and even wolves and jackals. You learn to recognize their tracks, you learn their habits, and you learn how to avoid them. A scorpion, for example, likes to hide under rocks or in the cool shade of a bush. You learn to be careful where you step, and you learn to always shake out your boots before you put them on in the morning. A snake, like the deadly horned viper, often buries itself in the sand, with only its eyes showing. You learn to read the subtle ripple in the sand that indicates its presence, and you learn to give it a wide berth. These aren't just skills, they're instincts that are passed down from a parent to a child. But what about the bigger predators? The wolves and the jackals that might attack your flock of goats or your herd of camels. You learn to deal with them, not with aggression, but with a mix of cleverness and defense. You learn to build a fence of thorny bushes around your camp at night, a simple but effective barrier that a predator won't want to cross. You learn to keep a fire burning throughout the night, as the light and the smoke are a deterrent. And you learn to sleep with one eye open, with a trusty rifle or a sharp sword at your side, just in case. Now for a quirky tidbit. The Bedouins also had a specific, almost ritualized way of dealing with rival tribes. In a world where resources are scarce, a dispute over a well or a grazing patch could be a matter of life or death. But instead of an all-out war, they would often engage in a kind of bloodless battle of words. A poet from one tribe might challenge a poet from another tribe to a poetic duel, or mu'alakat. The two poets would trade verses back and forth, with each trying to outwit and outmock the other. The winner would be the one who could compose the most clever, most cutting, and most elegant verses. This wasn't just a game, it was a way of settling a dispute without a single drop of blood being shed. The loser would be humiliated, and the winner would be the hero of his tribe. It was a fascinating, and surprisingly civilized, way of dealing with conflict in a world that was often anything but. But what about the really serious stuff? What about a rival tribe that wants to raid your camp, to steal your camels and your food? You're not just a passive victim, you're a warrior. You learn how to use a sword, a spear, and a rifle. You learn how to ride a camel at full speed and how to fight from its back. You learn how to set up an ambush, and you learn how to defend your camp. The Bedouins were known for their bravery and their ferocity in battle. They were not to be trifled with. Historians still argue whether the Bedouins' love of fighting was a cultural trait or a simple necessity of their lifestyle. Were they a naturally aggressive people, or was their fighting spirit a simple reflection of a world where you had to be tough to survive? The answer, of course, is a bit of both. The Bedouins were a proud people, and they would defend their honor, their family, and their tribe with their lives. But they were also a pragmatic people, and they knew that a battle was a risky, and often costly, affair. So they would always try to resolve a conflict with words before they resorted to a sword. It was a dance between aggression and diplomacy, a constant balancing act between survival and honor. You're not just a man in the desert, a survivor from a bygone era. You are part of a legacy that echoes through time, a living history that has shaped the modern world in ways you might not even realize. The ancient wisdom of the Bedouins, their resilience, their hospitality, their deep connection to the land, it's not just a thing of the past. It's an enduring legacy that still influences the world around us. A mainstream historical fact is the profound impact of Bedouin culture on the development of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad himself came from a Bedouin tribe, and the early Islamic empire was built on the backs of Bedouin warriors and their nomadic way of life. The values of hospitality, honor, and loyalty that were so central to Bedouin society became the bedrock of Islamic culture. The Bedouin poetic tradition, with its emphasis on direct, powerful language, is reflected in the elegance and beauty of the Quran. To understand the Bedouin, in a way, is to understand the very roots of one of the world's great religions. But the legacy goes beyond religion. Think about the modern world. We are, in many ways, a nomadic people. We move for work, for school, for a better life. We don't have camels, but we have cars, trains, and planes. We don't have a tent, but we have portable homes, and we can set up a new life in a new place in a matter of days. The Bedouins were the original global nomads, and their ability to adapt to a changing environment is a skill that we still value today. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Bedouins were also some of the world's first entrepreneurs. They were the original long-distance traders, the ones who would brave the dangerous desert to transport spices, silk, and other goods from one end of the world to the other. Their trade routes became the arteries of the ancient world, and their knowledge of the desert, their ability to navigate by the stars and the sand, was a priceless commodity. They were the original logistics experts, and their methods of transport and trade are still being studied today. And what about the Bedouin social structure? The emphasis on family, on community, on a decentralized form of government, it's a model that is still being explored by scholars and sociologists. In a world that is becoming more and more centralized, more and more bureaucratic, there's a certain elegance to a system that is based on trust, on loyalty, and on a deep, shared sense of responsibility. Historians still argue whether the Bedouin social model is an ideal that we should aspire to, or if it's a model that can only work in the specific, unique conditions of the desert. Was it a utopia, a perfect society, or was it a simple reflection of a world that demanded a specific kind of social order? The answer, of course, is a bit of both. The Bedouin way of life, with its emphasis on simplicity, on resilience, and on a deep, abiding connection to the natural world, is a powerful reminder that we don't need a lot to be happy. We don't need a big house, a fancy car, or a closet full of clothes. We just need to be in a community, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and to have a deep sense of purpose. The Bedouins, in a way, are a kind of living philosophy, a testament to the power of the human spirit to survive and to thrive in the face of impossible odds. As you drift off to sleep, remember their journey. Remember their strength. And remember that the same spirit of resilience that allowed them to survive is also inside of you. The stars are fading now, the desert night giving way to a soft, pre-dawn glow. The air is still and cool, and the world is holding its breath. The camels are settled, the fire is embers, and the stories have come to an end. The desert, in a way, is a mirror, and the Bedouins are a reflection of what we can be: strong, resilient, and deeply connected. Their journey is over for tonight, and so is yours. The rhythm of their lives, the gentle sway of their camels, the quiet hum of their stories, let it all wash over you, a lullaby from a long-lost world. Feel the peace of the desert night, the deep, abiding sense of calm that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. Let the sand be your mattress, the stars be your blanket, and the whispers of the wind be your guide. Close your eyes now, and let yourself drift away into the deepest, most peaceful sleep. Good night.